Hello guys, Nigel here, and today is, Monday the 24th of February 2020, and today I'm going to do a little bit of assembly. So all you've seen so far is me destroying everything, taking it all apart. And so today I'm going to do some assembly, and we're going to look at the input shaft on the transfer box. Why am I doing this? Well, I want to rebuild the transfer box in one go. What I don't know is if my bearing preload is going to be right on the input shaft. So if it was right from the factory, it will be right now, unless the bearings have worn out. So I'm going to show you a method I'm going to use for checking that and making sure I get my tooth out of preload. Also, the other thing I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to remove the sealant. Now there's a sealer they use on this part. This is the input shaft. This is where the round plate goes on the back for the PTO. And they use this very thin gasket material. It's a liquid gasket that dries rock hard, and I've tried everything to remove it, and I found the only way to get it is heat. So I'll show you how I go about doing that. I've also done some work on the rotisserie. You see the Mustang is back in the garage. Unfortunately I keep having to swap everything around, so yeah, it's a bit of a pain because when the Mustang's in the garage I can't grind or weld or anything, obviously. And I can't go doing anything outside because it's wet and windy, so I'm sort of restricted to doing stuff that doesn't make any sparks or mess or anything, that's safe to do next to that without damaging it. But then of course the work I need to do really involves cutting, grinding and welding, so I can't be cleaning the bench down for meticulously clean work every other day. The weather is, I'm absolutely, I don't know about how you feel if you're in the UK, I am absolutely and utterly pissed off with it. It is just every day is something different. So you know, the wind dries down, like now the wind's died down a bit, but it's wet. Okay, so I can't work outside because it's wet. But tomorrow it'll probably be blowing a bloody gale and not raining. So, and then the next day it'll probably be quite nice, but it'll be freezing cold. And it's just, this weather is just absolute bollocks. I've never known it like this. It's just day after day after day, and apparently we've got another storm coming now next weekend. And I mean, I'm down in Gloucester, I've got it easy up north. People, poor people up there, oh, it's just dire, and in South Wales. So anyway, what I want to do is work on this input shaft for the transfer box and show you how I set the bearing preload without actually having to knock anything about. So let me get the camera on the bench and then I'll show you where we're going. Okay, so as we can see on here, we can get it to focus, is this, see those white deposits around there? They're absolutely rock hard, and that is the sealant material they've used. Now my suggestion would be, if you're stripping one of these, one of the later gearboxes without the gasket, clean it off straight away, because from what I remember it was still liquid when I took it apart. But I've tried all the gasket removers, I've tried scraping it and everything, and obviously because it's an aluminium face to face with just this liquid gasket, then obviously it needs to be quite good, so you can't go hacking around at anything. But I have noticed here on the back face there's all these bolt head marks. This is obviously where in the factory they actually set the preload up. So basically what we've got in here, if you're not familiar, you've got a bearing race. Where are we? We've got a bearing race in here, and on the back of there is a shim. So you'll see that great big thick shim in there behind the bearing, and that's the bearing, that's the shim that sets the preload. Now what I could do is knock this bearing out and set the preload that way, or get another thinner shim and try that. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try something different. But first of all, let's look at getting this off, and I found the best way to get it off is a blow lamp. If you get it hot, obviously not hot enough so you're going to distort the aluminium, if you just get the metal to sweat, and then once the sweat starts to dry out, you can see it just comes off. It's almost like liquid. In fact, to me it's very reminiscent of like sellotape. You see it on there. It's almost like the goo you get left behind with sellotape. So that's the way to do that. And this is a fantastic little thing. It's made by a company called Unger, you see there, and it holds a razor blade at the end. It makes a fantastic scraper. It's made in the USA. I got it from a pound shop, so yeah, really good. So I'm going to get on and get all this scraped off there. Oh, just as a final touch, just go over it very gently with a wire brush, just to make sure you've got all the remnants off, because You know, if you've got this on here and it's only a thou thick, that's half your tolerance. Right, here we are at the bench. So let me ask you, ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? I did start to explain and then went off on a rant about the awful weather and everything. So basically the reason I'm doing this now is I want to get the end float checked and set correctly, or checked at least, because I want to be able to build the transfer box up in one go. Obviously, as I've just explained, I don't want to be having it in bits and be grinding around in the garage and everything. I want it all cleaned, all through the wash tank, all laid out clean, on clean cloths or clean cardboard, whatever, and then assemble it. And then I can wrap it up, put it away, and be carrying on with other stuff. So basically the objective here is to get this end float set now, because there's a shim in here and it's about 3.5mm thick. Now it comes in, I can't remember the sizes, but it comes in sort of a couple of thou. You can get a shim kit anyway from Ashcroft's. So it comes in all these different sizes, or different sizes are available to actually set your preload to thou, 0.05mm, 50 microns. So you want 2 thou of preload on these bearings, and to do that we measure it with a clock. You can use friction or whatever I think they talk about in the manual. I'm going to measure it directly with a clock. Now what I could do, and someone else has done, is knock this bearing out with its shim and then put the bearing back in with no shim at all, and then what I'd have is about 3.5mm of end float on the actual shaft itself, going up and down. And the trouble is with that is all that end float like this, you're gonna get sideways and rocking and everything. So what I'm going to do is shim this away a known amount and then check what the end float is. So what I've got here, you used to be able to get this. This is Starrett feeler stock. And as you can see, it's 10 thou. I've got 3 pieces here, so I'm going to use that bolt, and that bolt. So I'm going to lay this across like this. I'll get the clock out of the way. And as Mike discovered on the Britannica Restorations, if you've got one of these clocks with a mag base like this, with the Eclipse one with the magnet base, it's an M8 thread in there, so you can actually just take that off the base and screw it into that bolt hole there, which is for the locking tab for the intermediate shaft. So that was dirty, so I'll just clean my hands again. This is the trouble, you see, when you have a workshop, you do everything in, everything gets covered in grinding media, filler dust and all that, and you have to clean before you do anything that requires a level of cleanliness. So we've got these three pieces of 10 thou shim here. So basically now, if that shim's correct, I should see 8 thou of end float. Now this is an Imperial clock, so we're talking Imperial. So there we go. So I'm going to drop this gear down in here. I don't think it matters which way, because you can actually put it in the wrong way round. So that gear's sitting in there now. Just give it a quick turn, make sure there's nothing in the bearing faces. Okay, and then I'm going to drop my cover on. Now I've got a large hole here, we've also got an indentation up here that lines up. So I'm going to drop my cover into the bore, give it a little twist to make sure I don't jam anything up. There we go, that's sat on there now. Now I've got 3 M10 bolts here with aluminium spacers, and the reason I've done that is to shorten the thread because they're too long. But you don't want to be using tiny little sort of 20mm long bolts or something. You want good thread engagement. It's no good when you've got, the bolts are going into an aluminium thread. You want to make sure you've got good thread engagement. So I'm just going to put these bolts in here. It doesn't matter if we mark this face slightly, because it's just a cover goes on there with a silicone seal anyway. So get these shims into position so they're pretty even, just like piston rings. There we go. So now when I pull this down, I'm just going to gently nip it first of all. And they have to come down to 25 Newton meters. Now I'm not going to pull them down that much, because with it raised up like this, it's likely to I'm just going to pull them down just so it's sat flat. What I don't want to do is bow it. Where I pull that bolt down, it will basically bow it there. So that bearing sat in there. I can't feel any end float on it. So let's get this clock down onto there. This is a really, these clock stands are awful old things. They're horrible. The modern ones are like the arm where you have the one clamp. I really don't like these old things. Takes me back to my apprenticeship days. So we'll turn this round. Okay, we can get the. You can see you do this up, and it takes about 50 Newton meters of torque to tighten the bloody things up. If you didn't know, these things are called monkeys. Okay, so make sure this clamp is loose. We'll zero the clock. Like so. Not sure if you can see that, can you? You probably can. And then I'm going to get in here and I'm just going to see if I can lift this gear up, and it would appear that I have no end float whatsoever. Which is a bit worrying. Let's just turn this around. See if I can get in there and lever it with something. Get another piece of wood in there. It would appear I've got no end float whatsoever on there. So that means that basically it looks like this gearbox was assembled with way too much preload. So we'll just give these bolts up finger tight. Yeah, there's no end float on there at all. It's incredible. No end float whatsoever. I've got no play side to side, even though I've got this 10 thou shim in there. So then what I'll do is I'll put some more shim in there now, go up to 20 thou and see what happens. Right, so I've reset it now. What I've done, I've cut up a strip of shim and I've put 2 pieces of shim next to each bolt. So basically that's 20 thou now, and I've just nipped the bolts up, literally just nip them up. They're not torqued up or anything for fear of bending something, because I haven't got a full contact area. So basically the clock is there set on 0, you can see here. And if I go in now and get my spanner in there, I can lift it up and you can see I've got about 7.5, maybe 8 thou of end float. So that would indicate that if I've got 8 thou of end float and I've got 20 thou of shims, that would indicate that the actual shim that's in here is too thick. So that means with nothing in there, I would have 12 thou of preload on that bearing, which is 6 times too much. Now I know it's not very warm, and aluminium does contract in cold weather, but it doesn't contract that much. So I think what I'm going to have to do is get another shim from, or get a shim kit from Ashcroft's, and see if I can sort this out, because that is way too much preload on there, way too much. If that's, you know, if this is correct, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be. You can see it yourself. There's, I mean, it's definitely, the first mark round there is 10 thou. That's less than 10 thou. So you can see that on there. If I zoom in, let me zoom in for you. So you can see it. Okay. There you go. Just as a final matter of interest for you guys, I've taken the shims out and just nipped these bolts up, and I can just turn that without hurting my fingers. So there we go. Let me know in the comments below if it's, you know, what is it now? It's about 7 degrees, I think. Should I be doing this in warmer temperatures? I don't know, but that certainly isn't right, is it? No way is that right. Thanks for watching.